My cousin Cal roped me into this winter camping trip right before Christmas. This time it was some completely off-the-map stretch of forest in the Appalachians. He said it would be good for me, and honestly I was tired enough mentally, emotionally, everything that I didn't argue. I just needed to get out of the city, out of my head. So I said, yes. We met up in Dorset, this tiny town with one gas station and a diner that looked like it hadn't changed since the 60s. Cal had already packed the truck with 2 old military tents, some battered hiking gear, and a crank-powered radio he'd probably picked up at a yard sale. He tossed me a thermos of coffee and grinned like he had a secret. The place he picked wasn't on any map I could find. According to Cal, it used to be part of an old coal company's land back in the 40s, then got abandoned after a landslide messed up their operations. He said there were still traces of the old site, maybe a foundation or 2, but mostly just untouched forest. Nobody goes out there, he said, not even hunters. We drove as far as we could up an old fire road that eventually ended at a rusted gate. From there, we hiked 5 miles in, the snow getting deeper with each step. There were no markers, no signs. Cal kept checking a crumpled top of map and muttering to himself, but he looked confident enough that I didn't question it. When we finally reached the clearing, it was late afternoon. The sun was already dipping low, and everything had that bluish tint that comes with cold shadows. The space itself wasn't anything dramatic, just a flat open area surrounded by dense woods. There was a shallow, frozen-over creek running along the far edge, and a crumbled stone wall peeking out from beneath the snow. We set up our tents just inside the tree line, figuring the trees would offer a bit of a windbreak. That first night was uneventful, mostly just cold. The kind of cold that settles in your bones and makes your sleeping bag feel like a coffin. I remember waking up once because I heard something, a soft shuffling sound near Cal's tent. But it didn't last long, and I figured he'd just gotten up to take a leak or adjust something. I stayed wrapped up and let it go. The next morning we heated water over the camp stove and made gritty instant coffee that tasted more like smoke than caffeine. Cal was in good spirits. He talked about exploring the clearing and maybe hiking out to the creek bend he'd spotted on the map. We walked the area slowly, poking through the undergrowth and kicking at snow-covered debris. Cal pointed out this thick steel cable buried under some pine needles and what looked like a rustic gear or pulley system. Probably part of the old winch setup, he said, used to drag the logs down to the creek. But what got my attention were these little holes scattered across the clearing. At first I thought they were animal burrows, but the more I looked, the stranger they seemed. Each one was maybe 5 or 6 inches across, too narrow for anything big, too deep to be random. Some were filled with snow and dead pine needles, but others were open, just dark gaps in the frozen ground. They weren't clustered like dens. They were spaced out almost evenly, like someone had planted fence posts and then pulled them out. I mentioned it to Cal. He just shrugged. Old logging stuff probably. Who knows? That night, things got weirder. I couldn't fall asleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd startle awake again, like my brain refused to power down. Then I heard something. A faint tapping noise, like someone lightly knocking on a tree with a rock or a stick. Not constant, just spaced out. 2 taps, then silence, then 3, then none. It felt random, but not natural. I held still and listened. Eventually it stopped, and then I heard snow crunching, not the wind moving branches or a squirrel digging. This was deliberate. 1 step, pause. Another step, it moved around the tent slow, measured like someone circling, checking the seams. Then nothing, just silence. I waited a long time before unzipping the flap. My fingers were stiff from holding still so long. Outside, the snow looked smooth. No prints, no marks, no marks. Just a few flurries drifting across the surface. The next morning, I didn't mention it, mostly because I wasn't sure what I'd even say. Cal looked tired, but he didn't bring it up either until he finished his coffee. I found boot prints around my tent, he said. Just 1 set. Not mine. He said they circled the tent once. No approach, no departure, just the prints like someone had materialized there, walked a ring, then disappeared. He tried the radio, spun the crank a few times, then frowned. Not even static, dead air. You want to head back? I asked. He looked off toward the creek for a second, then shook his head. Let's stay 1 more night, he said. I want to see something. That evening, about an hour before sunset, he led me out toward where the creek curved into a shallow ravine. The snow was thinner there, like the wind swept it clean. Cal stopped and pointed at a spot near the edge of the drop. This is where it happened, he said. I assumed he meant the landslide or something. What did? He kept looking at the ground. My granddad's cousin. Winter of 43. They found him right here. Still had all his gear on. No wounds. Just dead. They said it was exposure, but he hadn't even been gone a full day. 12 hours. Tops. No footprints but his own. I stared at him. And you thought this would be a fun camping spot. He didn't laugh, just turned and headed back. That night, I didn't even try to sleep. I sat in my bag with the lantern turned low, my knife in my hand, my ears tuned to every sound. Around midnight, it started again, but not footsteps this time. It was a dragging sound, soft and rhythmic, like someone pulling something heavy through the snow. Maybe a tarp. Maybe a coat. Whatever it was, it moved slowly around the tent. Then it stopped. Right outside. Then the zipper moved. I saw it in the dim light, just the tip pulling down slowly inch by inch. 3 inches, maybe 4. Then nothing. I lunged forward and shoved my hand out through the flap, knife first. Nothing. Just cold air and untouched snow. I unzipped the rest. Still nothing. But the zipper was down. I called Cal's name. No answer. I grabbed my boots, scrambled out, and ran to his tent. Empty. His sleeping bag was there. His pack was still there, but his boots were gone. I found what looked like his footprints leading out toward the creek again. I followed them, heart hammering. They led right up to the same spot he'd shown me, the edge of the ravine. And then they stopped. No slide, no fall marks, no disturbance. Just gone. I shouted for him until my voice was hoarse. When morning came, I packed everything I could carry, his gear and mine, and hiked back alone. The rescue team didn't find anything. Not a single print besides my own. No signs of anyone else. No trace of Cal. It was supposed to be a 4-day winter hike, just me and my friend Ezra heading out into a quieter part of the Appalachian backcountry, somewhere near the Tennessee-North Carolina border. We'd both done plenty of camping before, mostly in the summer, the usual weekend trips with friends or family. We checked in at the ranger station, just after lunch on a Monday. The guy behind the desk gave us that slow, skeptical look you usually get when you're about to do something mildly dumb, but not quite dumb enough to be stopped. He asked if we knew the trails up past Ridgeback Loop weren't really patrolled in the winter. We said, yeah. The first day was fine. Easy actually. Cold but dry. We covered about 7 or 8 miles before settling near this half-frozen stream that cut through a patch of thick pine. We pitched the tent, boiled water, and ate jerky in those instant mashed potato packets that always taste like a salty memory of real food. Ezra told a story about some guy he used to work with who thought you could survive on beef sticks and vitamin pills alone. And we laughed more than the story deserved just because it felt good to laugh out there. The next morning, as mentioned, he'd heard something walking around the tent during the night. Just a few soft crunches in the snow, slow steps, maybe 2 or 3 times circling. He said it could have been a deer, but he didn't sound convinced. He was trying not to make a thing out of it, which told me it already was a thing in his head. I hadn't heard anything. Usually I'm the one who wakes up if someone sneezes in the next 10 over, but I must have been dead to the world. We pushed deeper into the woods that second day, hiking past the bones of an old fire tower that had clearly been abandoned for decades. All that was left was the concrete base and a pile of rotting beams. Kind of cool in a forgotten structure kind of way, but also a little eerie, not creepy, just remote. Like no one had been near it in a long time. Eventually we came across this clearing wide open ringed by these thin trees that looked way too evenly spaced to be natural. Ezra stopped to take a photo, and I just stood there for a second, trying to figure out what felt off. It wasn't just the trees, it was how quiet it was. Even the wind had stopped. Later, looking at the photo on Ezra's phone, there was this faint blur in the center of the frame, not a shape. Not a figure, just a weird smudge that didn't match the lighting or the angle. It looked like someone had wiped the lens with a greasy thumb, except it wasn't on any of the other photos. That night, it got colder. We camped a little uphill from the clearing, just off the trail. Around midnight, we started hearing movement again. This time was rhythmic, steady crunching in the snow, slow and deliberate, just beyond where the firelight could reach. It never came closer. Never retreated, just paced. A few paces this way, a pause, then a few more. Ezra tried flashing his headlamp into the trees, but the second the light came on, it stopped. Like whatever it was didn't want to be seen or didn't need to move when it knew we were awake. I called out once, just a hello, half-hearted and shaky. No answer, no rustle, no animal bolt. Just silence again. We slept in shifts that night. Neither of us admitted it was out of fear, but we both knew. By the third day, we were both quieter. Ezra kept checking behind us like he expected to see someone trailing. I started noticing weird little details. Twigs snapped clean off trees at shoulder height. A pile of smooth stones stacked beside the trail that absolutely hadn't been there the day before. Boot prints that didn't line up with ours. I stopped walking at one point, turned around and stared at the trail behind us. The snow was patchy, but enough remained to track movement. Hours went forward. Something else had gone backward, not crossing us parallel. Pacing. We didn't talk about turning around, but we both started moving faster. That night we camped in a narrow gully surrounded by spruce. The trees were thick enough to block the wind, but tight enough to make everything feel smaller. Closer. Snow had started again. Light but steady. Ezra was reorganizing his pack, and I walked out to the treeline to brush my teeth. I looked up and saw someone crouched beside his gear, just sitting there like they'd been waiting for us to get distracted. I froze. The figure was maybe 20 feet away, not facing me, not moving. I called out, not loud, just sharp. The figure didn't react at first. Then slowly it straightened, not like a person standing up, more like something unbending from a crawl. It turned without looking at me and walked straight into the woods. Ezra came running when I yelled. We combed the edge of the camp with our lights. Nothing. No footprints, no disturbed snow, no sign anything had been there. His pack was untouched. Everything in its place. We agreed not to sleep that night. Around 3, while Ezra dozed lightly against a log, I saw it again, standing this time just at the edge of the firelight. Punched shoulders, long arms, not looking at us, not moving, just standing. Like it had wandered too close by accident and didn't know what to do next. I didn't blink, didn't breathe. Then the fire cracked, and it was gone. We were moving before sunrise. Didn't meet, didn't talk, just packed and got the hell out of there. We hiked for hours in near silence. We made it to the car by late afternoon and drove straight to a cheap motel 2 towns over. Every winter, I take a solo camping trip. That January, I picked a spot way out in the Appalachian woods, not too far from a place called Ballard Ridge. There was this narrow hollow near a creek that freezes solid by December, shielded on 3 sides by ridges and packed with trees thick enough to give you that feeling of being properly alone. The first night honestly was perfect. Bitter cold but calm. I boiled some snow in a small tin pot, made tea, and sat by the fire until the flames got low and my fingers started to stiffen. I crawled into my tent and burrowed deep into my sleeping bag. The silence out there doesn't feel empty. It feels full, like something alive is holding its breath. I love that feeling. Next day I hiked up the eastern ridge to get a better view of the terrain. It was steep enough to make my thighs burn, but when I got to the top I could see for miles. And then I saw it. Off in the distance, above the line of the western ridge, there was this black vertical shape. At first I thought it might be a charred tree. Maybe a relay tower, I thought. Or an old fire lookout, maybe. Except I hadn't seen any trails leading that way. No equipment sheds, no markers. Nothing like that was on the topo maps I'd studied. And in that kind of terrain, with how remote it was, it didn't make much sense. Still, I watched it for a bit, half expecting it to sway or shift like a tree would in the wind, but it didn't move, not even slightly. Eventually, I chalked it up to fatigue. I'd been hiking and setting up camp for hours the day before. My eyes were probably just catching shadows in a weird way. I made my way back down to camp, made some food, and didn't give it too much more thought. That night, I woke up feeling off, not because of a noise exactly, more like a pressure. It's hard to describe. Imagine the dull hum of an engine running far off, but instead of hearing it, you feel it in your teeth, like your jaws buzzing. That's what it felt like. I stayed still at first, listening, thought maybe a big animal had wandered close. I've had deer practically brush against my tent in the past. Once had a fox scratch around my pack, but this was different. There was no sound of movement, no wind, just that low internal thrum, like something invisible was vibrating under the ground. I unzipped the tent slowly and poked my head out. Nothing. The trees were still. The snow looked undisturbed. It was dead quiet. But then I looked up toward the ridge again, and that black shape was there. Only this time it was a lot closer. It was standing at the top of the western ridge, tall and narrow, outlined against the moonlit sky. Same shape, still no visible base. Still too thin to be a tree and definitely too tall to be a person. It didn't move, didn't lean. It just stood there like it was watching. Then without warning, it changed position. It didn't walk or shift. One second it was at the top of the ridge, and the next it was 30 or 40 feet lower, perched on a ledge just above a boulder. Still upright, still, no sound, just suddenly closer. My breath caught. I stared at it, barely blinking, and then it was closer again. Down the slope now, maybe halfway to the creek. That's when something in me snapped. I backed into the tent and zipped it shut, quick and tight, like that thin layer of nylon was going to keep whatever that thing was out. I sat there, gripping the zipper with both hands, every muscle in my body tight. The hum got stronger. It wasn't loud, but it felt like it was inside my skull. Like a dead TV screen after the power cuts. That kind of static, but deeper. And pulsing. Not steady. Almost like it was scanning. I remember pressing my fingers into my temples, as if that would muffle it. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Just sat there in the dark, waiting. When the sun finally started coming up, I unzipped the tent slowly, heart hammering. The ridge was empty. The snow looked untouched. No tracks. Nothing to prove I'd seen anything at all. I didn't bother eating. I just broke down camp fast, packed everything into my frame pack, and took the long trail out. One that wrapped around the valley, far away from that slope. That trip broke the habit. I didn't go camping the next winter, or the winter after that. I told myself I was just taking a break. Deep down I knew why. Then maybe 3 years later, I got this out of the blue email from a guy named Jared. He ran a hiking and outdoor survival forum I used to post on. Back when people still used those. He said he remembered a thread I'd written about the hollow near Ballard Ridge, and wanted to ask if I'd ever seen something strange out there. His exact words were, "Did you ever notice the totem?" I stared at that word for a long time. I replied, asked what he meant. He sent a photo. It was grainy and zoomed in, but I recognized it instantly. Same shape, that same thin black column standing against the sky just above the ridge. He said it hadn't been there when he and his son set up camp, but the next morning it was just there. They couldn't explain it. His son spotted it first, and said it gave him a headache just to look at. Jared said the same thing every time he stared at it for more than a few seconds. He'd get this awful queasy feeling like being car sick without moving. We'd been cooped up for weeks. New baby, freezing weather, holiday stress, the usual suspects. So when Aaron suggested a short winter trip to clear our heads, I was all in. It wasn't anything elaborate. Just a 2-night stay at a heated cabin near Alder Ridge, tucked into the lower edge of the forest preserve where the hills begin to fold into shallow creek beds. We packed the car like we were going to live there for a month. Layers, snacks, a pack and play. All of Mason's things, even brought that tiny Bluetooth speaker we always forget we own until it's too late. Jan, Aaron's mom, had done trips like this before and helped keep us grounded. It felt good to have her with us, not just for Mason, but for that weird calm confidence she always seemed to carry. I checked the forecast obsessively the week before. It was supposed to be cold, but dry. I must have refreshed the radar 15 times the morning we left. I don't know what I was expecting to see change, but I needed to feel like I had some control over something. We weren't going far, just under 3 hours, but with a newborn, even that felt like an expedition. The cabin was nicer than the pictures. One main room with a small kitchen, a big stone fireplace, 2 bedrooms, and a little side room Jan claimed for herself. Nothing fancy, but cozy. It was already warm inside when we got there. Someone had preheated the place. I remember thinking how thoughtful that was. Now I wonder who had the keys before us. That first evening was perfect. We made a fire in the pit outside, cooked sausages over it, drank cocoa with whiskey once Mason went down. Jan offered to take the night shift with him, just to give us a break. Aaron and I sat on the porch under a few thick blankets, just talking and listening to the fire pop. I hadn't felt that relaxed in months. The next morning, though, I woke up feeling like I'd been body slammed in my sleep. My throat felt like it had been sandpapered. My joints throbbed. My head was full of static. I figured it was just one of those quick colds that hits when you finally stop moving and your body lets its guard down. Either way, I was useless. I stayed in bed while Aaron and Jan took Mason on a short hike out behind the cabin. There was an old fire road that led to a lookout point. Nothing dangerous, just something to kill time. I must have drifted in and out for a while because the next thing I remember clearly is the sound of footsteps, not the soft kind. These were deliberate, slow, heavy. I heard each step as it hit the wooden planks of the porch, one after another, like someone was walking with full intent. The kind of steps you make when you're sure of where you're going. They reached the door and stopped. There was a long creak from one of the boards settling under weight, then silence. I waited a second, thinking maybe Aaron forgot something and had come back early. I didn't hear the door open though. No sound of the knob turning or someone calling inside. Just that weird still silence. So I got up and opened it. Nothing. The porch was empty. There were no footprints in the fresh layer of snow. It had only dusted lightly that morning, just enough to leave a trace if someone had walked through. But the surface was completely smooth. I stepped out and looked around. No movement. No animals, no breeze. Everything was just still. It didn't make any sense. And then maybe 20 seconds later, Aaron and Jan came around the bend from the trail. Mason bundled in Aaron's arms, both of them laughing about something. All three of them together. I just stood there, door half open, trying to make sense of what I just heard. I told Aaron later when we were inside, she didn't laugh, but she definitely gave me a look. Kind of says, okay sure, but also maybe not. Then she suggested maybe I'd been dreaming. Feverish, half asleep. Maybe I imagined it, I didn't push it. That night though, things got stranger. The temperature dropped sharply after sunset, and the wind kicked up enough to rattle one of the shutters. Mason wouldn't settle, so Aaron took him out to the main room to rock him near the fireplace. She swaddled him tight and sat in that big old chair by the window, swaying back and forth while the wind howled outside. I was asleep again when she woke me, her hands shaking my shoulder. "Did you go outside?" she asked, voice low. I blinked at her, still groggy. "No, why?" She told me she'd heard someone or something moving around the cabin, not just near it, around it, walking through the snow, slow and steady. She said it circled the entire structure once, then came up onto the back deck. And then there were 2 knocks on the wall. Not loud, not angry, just precise. 2 thuds, like someone wanted us to know they were there. And then nothing. No footsteps walking away. No creaks. No second round. Just total, deliberate silence. She said she waited 10 minutes before waking me, too scared to move. I wanted to come up with a rational explanation. Wind shifting trees. Snow falling from the roof, a fox or something scurrying by. But Erin was pale, and her hands were trembling. She's not someone who scares easily. We slept in the same room. After that, Mason tucked between us. Erin kept the bedroom door closed and locked, even though we were the only ones there. We decided to leave early the next morning, but the cabin gave us one last reminder before we could get out. Jen offered to keep Mason in her room that night. She wanted us to get a full night's sleep before the drive. Erin was hesitant, but eventually agreed we needed the rest. Just before midnight, Jan screamed. We shot out of bed and ran down the hall. She was standing near the window, holding Mason so tightly I thought she might crush him. Her eyes were fixed on the front door. She didn't blink. She didn't move. She said someone had pounded on the door 3 times, not like a neighbor checking in or a prankster messing around. She said it sounded like someone was trying to break it down, like they were using both fists and all their strength. And then silence, no footsteps, no retreat. She opened the door almost immediately, instinctively, but there was no one there. No marks, no prints. The snow on the steps was untouched. She didn't sleep after that. She dressed Mason in his coat and boots and held him in bed, eyes open the entire time, like she was waiting for the next knock. We left at first light, didn't eat, didn't clean up, just grabbed our things and got in the car. Erin didn't say a word for the first hour of the drive. I didn't ask her to. We thought it was over, but a few weeks later, something started to feel off. Mason had started babbling by then. Little words, repeats, normal baby stuff. The one morning while I was changing him, he pointed down the hall and said, "Clear as day, cold man come inside." Just like that. Flat, no inflection. I froze. Erin laughed it off when I told her. Said maybe he picked it up from a cartoon or something. But he said it again that night. And the next night, always at night, always while pointing toward the door. "Cold man come inside." By the 3rd time, Erin wasn't laughing anymore. The final straw came over dinner. About a month after we got back, we were eating spaghetti, just the 3 of us, and Mason started talking about playing with his other grandpa. Erin smiled and asked if he meant her dad, who lived a few hours away. Mason shook his head. No, the one with snow eyes. He was hiding. He said it like he was remembering something. We didn't finish the meal. We turned off the lights early that night, sat in the living room in silence for a long time while Mason slept. We canceled our spring trip, sold the camping gear. The snow clothes. Erin didn't want anything that reminded her of that weekend. Jan doesn't talk about it either. Rex had just turned 16 a few weeks earlier. He's my cousin, but since we're almost 20 years apart, I've always felt more like an older brother than anything else. His mom, my aunt, raised him alone, and after she passed, I tried to be there for him as much as I could. Lately, though, it was like he'd gone quiet inside. Stopped talking much. He was skipping classes, ignoring texts, avoiding everyone except maybe me. So for his birthday, when I asked what he wanted to do, he just said nothing loud. I figured what he really needed was space, real space. So I suggested a camping trip, just the two of us. I knew a spot way out in the Appalachians near where West Virginia grazes the Kentucky border. It was remote, but beautiful. The last time I'd been there was with my dad over a decade ago, and I remembered how it felt quiet in a way that pressed in from all sides. I thought that quiet might help him breathe again. We loaded up the car on a Friday, left before sunrise, took side roads most of the way, and ended up parking off a barely there turnoff that looked more like someone's driveway than anything official. From there, it was about a 2-mile hike to the clearing I had in mind. We hiked in slow, the snow crunching under our boots. Early December cold had settled in, but it hadn't snowed in a few days. So everything was dry and crusted over. No footprints ahead of us. No tire marks on the dirt road, just woods. I remember Rex looking up at the trees a lot, not in a nervous way, more like he was noticing them for the first time. The way the branches twisted, how the snow sat on them like icing. It was the most relaxed I'd seen him in months. We reached the side around 4. It was a clearing tucked between 2 ridges with a natural windbreak of pines on one side. There was no signal, no planes overhead, no buzzing power lines. Just the sound of us unrolling the tent and the occasional snap of ice on a branch. That night, we built a fire with some of the kindling I'd brought and melted snow for Coco. He actually smiled. We talked for hours about school, his friends, how weird it still felt living with his grandparents. Most of the talk circled back to his mom. I let him lead the conversation. Just listened. We turned in around 10. Rex zipped himself up in his bag and didn't say goodnight, just stared at the tent ceiling until his eyes closed. Somewhere around midnight, I woke up shivering. The fire had burned out and the stove was cold. My face hurt from the cold air. I was about to reach for my gloves when I noticed Rex wasn't in his sleeping bag. The flap of the tent was unzipped. I pulled on my boots and stepped out into the snow. He was standing maybe 15 feet away, right at the edge where a little clearing turned back into trees. His coat was zipped, his boots on, hands at his sides, completely still. I whispered, "Rex, what are you doing?" He didn't answer right away. He turned his head toward me slowly, like it took real effort. "She's out there," he said. My stomach dropped a little. I asked who. He just stared into the woods, no blinking, like he was watching something I couldn't see. I walked over, touched his sleeve. He jerked, almost stumbled like I'd yanked him out of sleep. And then he raised his arm and pointed toward a tree in the distance. It was a pine snapped clean in half about 15 feet up. That wasn't unusual. Storms knocked down trees all the time, but it did stand out the way it leaned broken and hollowed in the center. "She's been standing there for a while," he said quietly. I looked. The snow was undisturbed. No tracks, no shape, just the forest. The air was so still it felt like the trees were holding their breath. I told him it was probably a dream, or maybe his eyes playing tricks in the dark. He didn't argue, just turned and walked back to the tent. Neither of us said another word that night. He zipped himself in and didn't move. I lay there wide awake, listening to every creak of snow and shift of branches. The next morning I made oatmeal while Rex wandered near the creek. He came back in time to eat and said he'd had a weird dream, but couldn't remember it. I didn't push. We spent the day hiking, followed a ridge trail that opened up into a frozen valley, spotted a few deer from a distance. It was beautiful in a raw, empty kind of way. The kind of beauty that doesn't feel like it was made for people. We circled back to camp around dusk, but something was off. It's hard to explain. The temperature hadn't changed. The sky looked the same, but the silence was different. Denser, like the forest had shifted somehow. Or like we were being watched, and the watcher didn't care if we noticed. We didn't build a fire that night. We didn't talk much. Just heated some soup, ate fast, and crawled into the tent. Right before bed, Rex broke the silence. "Do you think people live out here? Like full-time? Off the grid, no one knowing?" I told him, yeah, probably. I'd read stories about folks doing just that. He nodded slowly. But what if they weren't? People? I asked him what he meant. He just shrugged and zipped his sleeping bag over his face. That night, sleep was even harder. I lay there listening. Every sound felt magnified. At some point, I started counting the seconds between the creaks of ice outside, just to keep my mind from wandering. Sometime after 2, Rex whispered my name, not loud, just enough to pull me out of half sleep. There in the trees. I sat up fast. He was staring at the tent ceiling, pale and rigid. I grabbed my flashlight, unzipped the flap, and stepped outside. The cold hit hard. My fingers went numb almost instantly. But what stopped me wasn't the cold. It was what I saw. 3 figures, maybe 20 yards out, spaced perfectly apart, not moving. No flashlights, no visible gear, no sound. Just there. At first, I thought maybe they were trees. Shapes can play tricks on you in the dark, but then I realized they were standing on the snow, not behind it. I called out, "Hello, do you need something?" Nothing. Rex appeared beside me just a few steps back. His voice cracked when he said, "Don't talk to them." I turned to him. "What are they?" He shook his head, eyes wide. "They were closer last time." That chilled me more than the cold ever could. We backed toward the tent slow, trying not to make noise. That's when the movement started, not from the figures, but around us. A crunching in the snow, fast and wide, circling, like something was running through the trees around our camp. We didn't wait. I grabbed Rex's arm, yanked the emergency bag, and we took off. No time to pack, just ran toward the creek, hoping to loop around and find the road. The forest didn't cooperate. The trail was wrong. The creek bent the opposite way. Landmarks I knew from childhood were gone or in the wrong place. We passed the same pile of stones twice. My compass needle spun like a kid's toy. Rex kept whispering to himself, "She's here. She doesn't want us to leave." I asked him who she was. He wouldn't answer. We kept moving, slower now, exhausted, teeth chattering. At one point I saw boot prints ahead, ours, but deeper now, like someone had stepped in them harder, pressing the same shape into the snow. I stopped, turned nothing. Rex whispered, "She's standing behind us." I didn't look. I grabbed his arm and kept walking. Just before dawn, we found the service road. It was farther north than I'd expected, too far, but the car was still there. Windows unbroken, doors unlocked, like it had been untouched the whole time. We got in. I turned the engine, blasted the heat, and we drove in silence and never talked about that again. A week before Christmas, my girlfriend ended things. After she left, the apartment felt weird. So when my cousin Garrett texted me out of nowhere asking if I wanted to go winter camping, I said yes before he even finished explaining. I didn't care where or how cold it would be. I just didn't want to sit in that dead space another night. He picked a spot he'd been eyeing in the Appalachian Highlands, somewhere along the Kentucky-Virginia line. The only requirement, he said, was that we'd have to hike in a few miles since the truck couldn't make it past the forestry gate. We loaded up the next morning. Garrett brought most of the gear. We parked at the gate where the gravel forked away from the county road. There were no other cars, no footprints in the snow. We hiked in maybe 3 miles following a barely visible logging path. It felt like we were walking into a preserved bubble, quiet, undisturbed, with only the soft crunch of our boots breaking the stillness. The snow was about 6 inches deep. Enough to slow you down, not enough to stop you. We picked a clearing boxed in by dense pine and a steep ridge. Just enough space for 2 tents and a fire ring. Garrett said it used to be a staging area for loggers. He could still see the faint rectangular footprint of an old tool shed in the snow. The first night wasn't bad. Cold, definitely, but manageable. The fire kept things warm until we turned in. I lay in my tent staring at the nylon above me, listening to the fire crackle and pop until I finally dozed off. Then around 1 in the morning, I woke up needing to pee. I pulled on my boots, unzipped the tent, and stepped out. The fire was almost out, just a soft red glow in the ash. The trees were black outlines against a faint sky, and maybe 30 feet off, standing between 2 trunks, was something tall and narrow. At first I assumed it was a deer. That made the most sense. It wasn't moving. Its head was tilted low, almost sunken into its chest like it was listening to the ground. I squinted, trying to make out the shape better. I shuffled my boots in the snow, half expecting it to bolt. It didn't. No reaction at all. I clicked my flashlight on and swung the beam toward it, but all I saw were bare branches and a patch of snow where nothing moved. I didn't stay out there long. I finished up, backed into my tent, and zipped it shut all the way to the top. Next morning, over coffee and powdered eggs, I told Garrett. He grinned and said, "The dark messes with your eyes." "The cold too," he added, chewing. "It's like visual static." Your brain fills in what it thinks should be there. Maybe I didn't press it. After breakfast, we hiked up a ridge behind the camp to get a better view. The climb wasn't easy. The slope was slick and scattered with loose rock. At the top, we found the remnants of a chimney, stone and moss covered, maybe 4 feet tall. No cabin left, just the fireplace. It looked like it had been untouched for decades. We took a few pictures, joked about rebuilding the rest of the house, and then spotted a narrow path heading down the far side of the ridge. It didn't look like an official trail, more like a natural indentation worn over time. Garrett wanted to follow it. I didn't. We didn't know how far it went or if we could make it back before dark. He pushed for a bit, but eventually let it go. That second night felt different. It started with footsteps. Not all at once. Just slow, soft crunches in the snow measured deliberate. I was still awake scrolling through old photos on my phone in the tent. Garrett had gone to sleep early. At first I thought it was a deer again or maybe a coyote, but the rhythm was wrong. Too even, not the scattered pacing of an animal but the careful, almost intentional movement of someone walking. The steps circled the site, not in a full loop but in a kind of arc, then stopped. I held my breath, waited, nothing. I sat up, unzipped the tent just enough to peek out. The fire had burned down again, just the faintest glow. I didn't see anyone, but just beyond the light's edge, there was a pattern in the snow. A curved line of footprints. Long, human-shaped. Bare. They didn't match mine or Garrett's. The gait was wider, the stride longer. Morning came, and Garrett saw them too. He crouched near one, and just stared. Might be some kind of frost heave, he muttered. Sometimes the snow shifts underneath, but even as he said it, I could tell he didn't believe it. The prints were too sharp. You could see the arch, the toes, even a faint crack in the heel. We planned to break camp after breakfast, but then my backpack was gone. It had been hanging from a hook on the tree, right next to my tent. 5 feet up, nowhere near the fire. I checked the ground, expecting to find it fallen or buried. Nothing. No drag marks. No sign of tearing or animal tracks. It was just missing. Gary got quiet. He stopped making coffee. We checked the area together, said almost nothing while we moved. I told him I'd carry whatever I could, and we'd just head out. As we packed, Garrett reached into his sleeping bag to fold it and stopped. He was holding something, a bundle of twigs tied together with red thread, small like the size of a clenched fist. It smelled like old bark and something faintly metallic. It had been tucked deep inside the sleeping bag, right where his chest would have been. He asked me if I put it there. I didn't answer. We didn't pack properly after that. We just jammed what we could into Garrett's frame pack and left everything else, including both tents. We took the same path back, but almost immediately something felt wrong. The terrain didn't match. The slope was off. Too steep. Certain markers we'd tied plastic tape in bright orange were missing. Others had moved. I told Garrett to slow down. He kept walking. Said we'd just gotten turned around. We argued. Whispered sharp little bites. Then I saw something black sticking out of the snow up ahead. My backpack. It was sitting upright like someone had placed it there. The straps weren't frosted. No snow on top. It hadn't been there long. I unzipped the outer pocket. Everything else was untouched, but that front section was stuffed with moss, wet gray-green moss and clumps of hair, human from the look of it. Dark. We didn't speak after that. We just kept walking. 2 hours later, we reached the truck. It was still there. Exactly where we'd left it. The snow was falling harder. Visibility was dropping fast. We didn't talk the whole ride back. Garrett dropped me at my place, barely saying anything. My cousin Nolan and I had planned a week-long winter hike through the Blue Hollow Range, somewhere along the Georgia-North Carolina border. We'd both grown up hiking and hunting in these mountains, so the idea of a few days off-grid didn't feel like a big deal. That evening, we set up camp at this clearing, tucked just off an old logging road. Snow had fallen earlier in the day, just a light dusting, but it was enough to muffle sound and make everything feel slower, more distant. The trail leading in was crunchy but manageable, and our boots were holding up fine. We were somewhere between Black Elk Bluff and Harmon's Hollow, basically in the middle of nowhere, no ranger posts or marked shelters for miles. We got the tent up, dug out a spot for the fire, and set a bare bag in the nearest climbable tree before the sun dipped. It was cold, but not painfully so, just enough to make your fingertips ache if you stopped moving too long. Dinner was the usual freeze-dried chili. A little scorched on the bottom, eaten straight from the bags with sporks. We were sitting by the fire, legs stretched out when we heard it. Footsteps, slow and steady, crunching through the snow behind us. We turned at the same time. An older man was making his way into the edge of the clearing, mid-60s, maybe even early 70s. Thin, tall, dressed in a heavy canvas coat with a fur-lined hood and carrying this hand-carved walking stick that looked more decorative than useful. He had a leather satchel slung across one shoulder, and despite the cold, he didn't seem to be shivering. He said his name was Daryl. No last name, no introduction beyond that. Just Daryl. He didn't ask to join us, just sort of nodded like he'd been expected, then settled onto one of the stumps like it had his name on it. The first few minutes were just odd. He talked a lot, but not in a normal conversational rhythm. It was like he had these lines memorized, little stories or facts that didn't really connect. He said we were lucky it hadn't stormed, then followed it up with, "Course, snow don't stop what wants to move." Then he laughed, real short and sharp, like he told a joke. But there was nothing funny about it. Nolan glanced at me when he said that. Not dramatic, just a small flick of the eyes like, "You hearing this too, right?" Daryl kept offering us things. First it was jerky wrapped in wax paper, said it was dear, cured himself. Then he offered peppermint schnapps. Then 2 cans of Coke, which he said he'd hiked in from over the ridge. Each time he made a point of saying he didn't drink or eat any of it himself, just like to share with folks. That phrasing stuck with me. Something about it sounded rehearsed. At one point, he asked if our tent was warm enough for 2 grown men. The way he said it wasn't outwardly creepy, but it had an edge I didn't like. The smile that followed was too long, too fixed. Eventually, he stood and said he had to go feed the dogs. That caught both of us off guard. He hadn't mentioned dogs before, just threw it out there like it was the most natural thing in the world. Then he said if we wanted real warmth or food, we could stop by his place. "You'll smell the smoke," he said, pointing off toward a dense patch of trees to the west. After he left, no one said, "You think he's for real?" I just shook my head. We didn't talk about it more than that. We both felt the same thing, but didn't want to name it. We cleaned up fast, dumped dinner scraps into the bear bag, tied it higher than usual. We checked the knots twice, then zipped ourselves into the tent before the fire even died out. Neither of us wanted to be out in the open longer than we had to. I laid there a long time just listening. Every crack of a branch made my ears twitch. Around midnight, I heard something faint like dragging, not footsteps, a soft, slow scraping across the frozen top layer of snow. Nolan was already awake. He sat up without saying a word, and I followed. We stared at the fabric of the tent, thin and pale from the moonlight. A shadow passed across it, not walking, gliding maybe heavy but not stomping. The movement didn't make sense. We held still. I don't think either of us breathed for a full minute. Then it was gone. No sounds after that, just the silence settling back in. I don't remember falling asleep. I must have eventually. The next thing I remember was light starting to filter through the fabric, soft and gray. We got up slowly, and when we stepped outside, the world felt rearranged. There were 2 sets of tracks around the tent. One was boots, narrow, deep, not ours. Definitely not from last night. The other set wasn't boots at all. For distinct contact points like paws, but wide, huge. And the stride too long for an animal that walked on all fours, too clean like it had stepped deliberately. Both sets circled the tent, once then veered off together toward the same patch of trees Daryl had pointed at. Then Nolan saw the bear bag tree. The rope was sliced clean halfway up. Not frayed, not torn, just cut. The bag was gone. The branch we'd used was stripped of its bark, and there were long, narrow gouges in the trunk, deep enough to expose the pale wood beneath, like claws. Except there weren't any tracks under it. No signs of something climbing or jumping. We didn't talk. We just packed. Not fast, not panicked, just moving with this shared understanding that we needed to go. It wasn't fear exactly. It was something heavier, like instinct. As we were stuffing the tent, Daryl appeared again from the same side of the woods the tracks had gone into. Same coat, same stick. He looked genuinely surprised to see us already packing. "Heading out already," he said, "was going to show you the dogs." His grin was wider this time, like he was enjoying something we weren't in on. We told him we had a long hike ahead, and didn't want to lose daylight. He nodded slowly, then said, "Well, careful now, trail does things in this snow loops back sometimes when it shouldn't." We didn't answer, just kept moving until we reached a ranger station near Carrion Ridge. First thing we asked was if anyone lived in the section we'd come from. The ranger looked at us for a second, then said, "There's a couple folks scattered back there." That night we stayed at a public campground with other tents nearby. About a week later, Nolan sent me a news article. Some hikers have reported seeing a large thin dog out near Harmon's Hollow. The piece described it as tall, moved strangely, definitely not a coyote. Local authorities brushed it off, probably a stray, nothing dangerous. I was 32 when I decided to do a solo winter camping trip up near Lake Islay, deep in the high woods, well beyond the trails anyone actually uses. I grew up hiking all over that region, bits of the Highland Trail, the ridgelines west of Mill Creek, but this time I wanted something different. I'd done a couple of solo hikes before, but never this deep in winter. I'd been itching for the solitude though, and I had the gear for season tent, decent layers, food packed tight and light. I figured if I started early, I'd reach my spot with plenty of time to set up before sunset. It was late December, dead cold, but I was looking forward to it. I followed a faded game trail up through the trees, maybe 6 miles in, gaining elevation the whole way. The hike itself was uneventful. Just that muffled silence that comes when everything's covered in snow. No wind yet, pines drooping under frost. That kind of landscape that makes you feel like you're walking through something untouched. I found a decent ridge, not too exposed, not too low, and set up camp just off a frozen stream. There was enough deadfall nearby to build a decent fire, and the slope behind me blocked most of the wind. Honestly, it felt perfect. I got the tin up, lit the fire, and made some hot lentils in the little alcohol stove I carry. Nothing fancy, but it hit right in that cold. After eating, I just sat there by the fire for a while, watching the last light drain out of the trees. My breath came out in thick clouds. Everything was still, that kind of stillness that makes you aware of your own heartbeat. Not a single branch moved. I couldn't even hear birds. It was peaceful. But after a while, it started to feel too quiet. I climbed into my sleeping bag early, figuring I'd get up before sunrise and do some exploring. I remember lying there, staring at the roof of the tent, waiting for sleep. No rustling, no wind, just total silence. I don't think I've ever experienced that level of stillness in the woods. It started to make me uneasy, like I was waiting for something to break it. I drifted in and out, woke up around 1 to total dark. The fire was out, no sound at all. I thought about getting up to stoke it, but stayed in the bag instead, just listening. Every now and then I thought I heard something distant, a clink maybe, like metal tapping metal. It wasn't loud, could have been in my head. Next morning I went about things like normal, got the stove going, made coffee, stretched out the soreness. It was colder than the day before, easily below 10. I decided to head out and scout the area a bit, see what was around the ridge. About a quarter mile west I found something I didn't expect. At first I thought it was just fallen timber, half covered in snow, sagging under moss. But then I noticed how the logs were arranged, not random. They formed a triangle, leaning together like a makeshift roof. Not high enough to stand under, but clearly man-made. An old shelter maybe, or trapper's blind. It was nearly invisible unless you were standing right on top of it. The wood was black from age, warped and half-rotted. A few rusted nails stuck out at weird angles, the kind you don't see much anymore. Inside, there was what looked like a broken platform, maybe an old bunk or shelf, but it had mostly collapsed. I stepped closer and immediately felt something strange. The ground beneath it was uneven, not like the slope had eroded, but like something underneath had pushed it up. It looked warped in this unnatural way, like the earth had been disturbed and settled wrong. The snow in that area was thinner too, and the air felt different, not warmer exactly, but less sharp, less dry. I stood there a few minutes just staring at the thing, trying to decide whether to take a closer look. I took out my phone to grab a picture, but the screen didn't respond. It turned on, showed the lock screen, then immediately went black, wouldn't power up again. I took out the spare battery and swapped it in. Same thing. It felt like a sign. I didn't touch the structure. I just turned and walked back to camp, telling myself it was probably nothing. Just an old hunting spot someone built decades ago and forgot about. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that it didn't belong. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my bag, listening to the wind pick up and die off again. The silence would come back in these strange waves, like something turning a volume knob up and down, over and over. At one point, I heard the metallic tapping again, louder this time, definitely real. 2 sharp clicks, then nothing. A few minutes later, it came again. Then I heard breathing. It was right outside the tent wall. Slow, drawn-out inhales. Wet, uneven exhales. Not an animal. Not someone walking by. Just breathing. I sat there holding my breath, trying to listen past the sound of my own heart thudding in my ears. After maybe 30 seconds, I unzipped the flap an inch and peeked out. Nothing. No footprints in the snow. No motion. Just a cold, dead stillness. Around 4, I gave up trying to sleep. I put on my boots and sat by the remains of the fire, watching the coals crack under a thin glaze of frost. I was shivering, but it wasn't just from the cold. I kept glancing into the woods, half expecting something to move. And then, something did. Off to the west, near where I'd seen that old shelter, a patch of steam was rising above the tree line. Like someone had lit a fire, or like something warm was radiating through the snow. It didn't make sense. Nothing should have been that warm out here. I grabbed my headlamp and walked toward it. The closer I got, the more I felt it. The air shifting. The cold just fading. When I reached the edge of the clearing, I realized I wasn't even shivering anymore. My breath didn't fog. The snow was gone from the ground in a 10-foot ring around the structure, and the soil was wet. Steam curled up in little whirls. I crouched down, heart pounding. I don't know what I was expecting to find, but part of me still thought somehow, stupidly, that this was natural. That maybe there was a spring under the earth or something. Then I heard it. A voice. A voice. It came from inside the structure, low and weirdly calm. "Hey man, come check this out." I froze. It sounded like me. Not exactly, but close enough to make my skin crawl. Like someone had heard me talk and was doing a bad impression, mimicking the tone, but not the rhythm. The words came out flat, delayed by a half second, like they were trying to catch up with themselves. Then again, closer this time. "Hey man, come check this out." Same words, same voice, but wrong. I stood up slowly, turned to leave. And just before I moved, I caught a flash of movement behind the structure, pale, low to the ground. Too fast to be a person crawling. I didn't wait. I ran. I ran. Back at camp, I stuffed my sleeping bag, grabbed the stove, left everything else. I just needed to move. I started hiking out before sunrise, following the same path I'd come in on. For a while, I didn't hear anything. Just my own footsteps and the occasional snap of ice underfoot. Then maybe half a mile down, I heard it again. "Hey man, come check this out." 20 feet behind me. I didn't turn around. I didn't stop until I reached the ranger station, just after dusk. My legs were shaking. I walked straight inside, locked the door, sat down and didn't move until morning. And now when winter hits hard and the nights get quiet, I imagine voice outside. "Hey man, come check this out."